"No one will hurt you anymore," the giant cowboy whispered to the trembling black teacher. The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt in the dusty center of Redemption Ridge. Clara Belle Travers stepped down with careful grace, clutching her worn leather satchel against her chest. The weight of 24 precious books pressed against her ribs through the cracked leather. Eyes followed her every movement. Women whispered behind cupped hands. Men spat tobacco juice and stared with undisguised hostility. Children peeked around wooden posts, their curious faces quickly yanked back by stern mothers. Clara smoothed her navy dress and lifted her chin. She had expected this reception. The letter promising community support had felt too good to be true even when she first read it in Denver. Mayor Lucius Brantley emerged from the saloon, his belly straining against a gold vest chain. His smile never reached his pale eyes. "Miss Travers, welcome to our humble town." He gestured toward a ramshackle building at the far end of the street. "Your schoolhouse awaits." Clara's heart sank with each step. The structure leaned precariously to one side. Broken windows gaped like missing teeth. The overwhelming stench of pig waste made her eyes water. "This is the former pig pen," Brantley announced cheerfully. "Best we could do on short notice." Snickers rippled through the growing crowd. A clod of mud struck Clara's shoulder, then another hit her pristine white collar. More laughter erupted as brown stains spread across her carefully pressed dress. Her satchel slipped from trembling fingers. Books scattered across the filthy ground. Pages fluttered in the desert wind like wounded birds. Clara dropped to her knees, frantically gathering her teaching materials before they blew away completely. A shadow fell across her. Massive boots appeared at the edge of her vision. Without a word, weathered hands began collecting scattered books with surprising gentleness. The crowd fell silent. Clara looked up into the face of the tallest man she had ever seen. His shoulders blocked out the harsh afternoon sun. Deep lines etched his weathered features. Kind eyes met hers briefly before he looked away. The giant cowboy stacked the rescued books carefully in her arms. The crowd watched nervously as he straightened to his full, imposing height. His presence commanded immediate respect tinged with fear. Clara whispered her thanks, but he had already melted back into the shadows between buildings. 3 small faces appeared at the edge of the dispersing crowd. Children with eager eyes and patched clothing. Their parents pulled them away quickly, but not before Clara caught the hunger for learning in their expressions. She turned back to the dilapidated pig pen. The stench made her stomach lurch. Broken glass littered the floor. Years of neglect had left the structure barely standing. Clara set down her books and rolled up her sleeves. These children deserved better. This town needed what she could offer, whether they wanted it or not. Clara spent the next week transforming the pig pen into something resembling a classroom. She scrubbed years of filth from wooden planks until her knuckles bled. The stench gradually faded, replaced by the clean scent of lye soap and determination. Each morning brought new challenges. The boarding house owner charged her double the normal rate for the cramped attic room. The general store clerk claimed they were always out of supplies when she approached the counter. Children threw stones at her windows after dark. Yet strange things began appearing at the schoolhouse. A stack of fresh lumber materialized overnight beside the front door. New glass panes leaned against the wall by morning. Lanterns hung from sturdy hooks that had not existed the day before. Clara suspected her mysterious benefactor was the giant cowboy, but he vanished whenever she tried to approach him. His imposing figure watched from distant shadows, always present but never close enough for conversation. 3 brave souls became her first students. Little Ruby, whose grandmother defied the entire town by sending her. Twin brothers whose father worked odd jobs and dreamed of better futures for his sons. They arrived each morning with eager faces and empty stomachs. Clara shared her meager breakfast with them. She taught them letters using charcoal on scraps of wood. Their quick minds absorbed knowledge like desert sand soaking up rare rainfall. Then the pressure began in earnest. Mayor Brantley visited the fathers of her students during their lunch breaks. Quiet conversations behind closed doors led to immediate consequences. The twin brothers stopped coming first. Their father could not meet Clara's eyes when she encountered him on the street. Ruby's grandmother lasted 3 more days before the threats became too severe. The old woman wept as she explained that Ruby would not return. Someone had poisoned their well water overnight. The message was unmistakably clear. Clara found herself alone in her makeshift classroom, teaching lessons to empty benches. A new figure appeared during her solitude. Eli Boone strolled through her open doorway with the confidence of a man, accustomed to walking into any room uninvited. His easy smile and careful clothes marked him as different from the rough locals. "Heard you could use some help," he said, tipping his hat with theatrical flourish. Clara remained wary. His charm felt too practiced, his interest too convenient. Yet Eli proved surprisingly useful. He possessed an uncanny knowledge of every person in town and their closely guarded secrets. Within days, subtle changes began occurring. The store clerk suddenly found supplies available when Clara needed them. The boarding house owner reduced her rent after a private conversation with Eli. Whispered conversations in the saloon took on different tones. Eli worked his silver tongue like a master craftsman wielding delicate tools. He never directly supported Clara in public. Instead, he planted seeds of doubt about Mayor Brantley's leadership. He questioned aloud why the town's children remained ignorant while other frontier settlements boasted thriving schools. Still, the isolation weighed heavily on Clara. Days passed without students. She maintained her routine, preparing lessons for empty chairs and sweeping floors that only she walked upon. The townspeople crossed to the opposite side of the street when they saw her coming. Mayor Brantley escalated his campaign. He visited every business owner personally. Anyone caught supporting the school would face serious consequences. The blacksmith who had briefly considered sending his daughter received a visit from men who made their intentions clear without speaking a word. Clara's world shrank to her tiny attic room and the hollow classroom. She wrote letters to friends in Denver, describing her struggles but never quite admitting defeat. The giant cowboy still appeared in the distance occasionally, but even his silent presence brought little comfort. The breaking point arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. Clara opened her schoolhouse door to find complete devastation. Desks lay overturned and splintered. Her precious books had been torn apart, pages scattered like autumn leaves across the floor. Crude messages covered the walls in dripping paint. Her geography primer lay in pieces near the window. The arithmetic book she had saved money for months to purchase was reduced to confetti. Years of careful collection and preservation destroyed in a single night of hatred. Clara sank to her knees among the wreckage. Hot tears mixed with the dust and debris around her scattered dreams. The weight of isolation and failure crushed down upon her shoulders like a physical presence. She had given everything: her savings, her health, her hope. The town had responded with systematic cruelty designed to break her spirit completely. With trembling hands, she gathered a piece of paper and began writing her letter of resignation. The words came slowly, each one an admission of defeat she had sworn never to acknowledge. The sound of boots on wooden steps made her look up through tear-blurred vision. The giant cowboy filled her doorway, his massive frame blocking out the morning sun. He surveyed the destruction with quiet fury burning in his eyes. For a long moment, he simply stood there. Then he stepped carefully through the debris and knelt beside her among the ruins of her classroom. "Don't let them win, Miss Clara." His voice carried the weight of conviction earned through personal suffering. "This town needs what you're teaching." Clara looked into his weathered face and saw something she had not expected: respect, understanding, and beneath it all, a deep well of pain that matched her own. Gideon McCallum helped Clara gather the torn pages with the same gentle care he had shown her books that first day. His massive hands moved delicately through the debris, treating each fragment like something precious. Clara watched him work and felt her despair slowly transform into curiosity. This giant of a man possessed depths the town never bothered to recognize. "I can rebuild this," Gideon said quietly, surveying the damage. "But I need something from you first." Clara wiped her eyes and straightened her spine. "What do you need?" Gideon's weathered face flushed with embarrassment. "I need to learn how to read." The confession hung in the air between them. Clara understood immediately that he had trusted her with his deepest shame. "My father founded this town," Gideon continued. "Everyone thinks I inherited his weakness instead of his strength. Truth is, I just see letters differently than most folks." Clara recognized the signs she had studied in teaching manuals, the careful way he avoided written signs, how he relied on memory and observation rather than documentation. His intelligence was obvious once she knew what to look for. They began meeting in secret after sunset. Clara taught Gideon by lamplight in her rebuilt classroom, while Eli kept watch for suspicious townspeople. Progress came slowly but steadily. Gideon's mind was sharp despite his learning differences. During their lessons, he revealed more about Redemption Ridge than Clara had learned in weeks of observation. His father had been a harsh man who built the town through intimidation and manipulation. The current power structure served a select few while keeping most residents ignorant and dependent. Eli proved invaluable during this period. His silver tongue worked magic in the saloon, planting doubts about Mayor Brantley's competence. He questioned why other frontier towns prospered while Redemption Ridge stagnated. His casual observations carried more weight than direct accusations. "Heard tell that Millerville's got themselves a proper school now," Eli would mention over cards. "Their land values doubled last year alone." Such comments sparked conversations among men who had never considered education as economic opportunity. Eli never pushed too hard, never revealed his hand completely. He simply let ideas take root in fertile ground. Meanwhile, Clara discovered that Gideon possessed a remarkable memory for detail. He could recall conversations word for word from years past. His knowledge of local business dealings ran deeper than anyone suspected. During one evening lesson, Gideon brought a stack of property documents for reading practice. Clara selected contracts at random, helping him sound out legal terminology. Her analytical mind immediately noticed patterns. Similar language appeared across multiple documents. Dates seemed inconsistent with her knowledge of local history. Signatures looked suspiciously uniform despite supposedly coming from different people. Gideon, who handles most property transactions in town, Mayor Brantley keeps the records, says it helps maintain order. Clara studied the documents more carefully. Her education had included basic legal studies. These contracts contained clauses that would be impossible for illiterate parties to understand. Worse, they seemed designed to transfer ownership through deliberately confusing language. "These families," she pointed to names on various documents. "Do they still own this land?" Gideon's expression darkened. "Most of them got forced out last year, claimed they defaulted on agreements they never understood." The scope of the corruption became clearer with each document Clara examined. Mayor Brantley had systematically cheated illiterate families out of valuable property. The railroad company acquiring these lands was paying prices far below market value. Clara realized she had discovered the real reason for the town's hostility toward education. Knowledge threatened a profitable criminal enterprise. Her investigation had to remain secret. Any hint of discovery would bring immediate retaliation. But Clara felt compelled to warn the potential victims before more families lost their homes. She began approaching people discreetly, offering to read their contracts and explain the terms. Most were too frightened to listen. Years of intimidation had conditioned them to avoid challenging authority. Clara's careful inquiries did not go unnoticed. Mayor Brantley appeared at her schoolhouse one morning with two deputies flanking him. His jovial mask had slipped, revealing cold calculation underneath. "Miss Travers, there have been accusations of theft and trespassing. Seems someone's been examining private documents without permission." Clara kept her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I've only tried to help people understand contracts they signed. That's not your place. You're here to teach children, not meddle in town business." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Clara realized her investigation had pushed too far too fast, but the evidence she had gathered was too important to abandon. Word spread quickly through the town's informal networks. By afternoon, angry voices filled the streets. Claims that the outsider teacher was stealing documents and spreading lies gained momentum with each retelling. Clara barricaded herself in the schoolhouse as the crowd grew larger and more hostile. Shouts echoed from the street outside. Someone threw a rock that shattered her carefully replaced window. Eli appeared at her back door as darkness fell. His usual easy confidence was replaced by grim urgency. "They're organizing a mob for tomorrow morning. Brantley's convinced them you're a threat to the whole town." Clara's hands shook as she realized the severity of her situation. She had uncovered corruption but lacked the power to expose it safely. The very people she had tried to help were now calling for her removal. Through her broken window, she could see torches gathering in the town square. Angry voices carried on the night wind, demanding justice for perceived wrongs. Dawn brought no relief to Clara's situation. The angry voices outside had grown louder overnight. Through her broken window, she watched the crowd swell beyond anything she had imagined possible. Mayor Brantley stood on the saloon steps, addressing the assembled townspeople with practiced rhetoric. His words painted Clara as a dangerous outsider who threatened their way of life. Each accusation drew fresh shouts of agreement from the mob. Clara gathered the property documents she had examined with Gideon. If this was to be her final stand, she would not face it empty-handed. The evidence of corruption might be her only defense against the lies being spread about her. The schoolhouse door rattled under heavy fists. Voices demanded she come outside and face the consequences of her actions. Clara's legs trembled as she realized there was nowhere left to run. She opened the door before they could break it down. The crowd filled the street from one end to the other. Angry faces stared at her with undisguised hatred. Women she had tried to help now called her a thief. Men whose children desperately needed education demanded her immediate departure. Mayor Brantley pushed through the crowd with theatrical authority. His smile carried the satisfaction of a predator cornering wounded prey. "Miss Travers, you stand accused of theft, trespassing, and disturbing the peace. The good people of Redemption Ridge have had enough of your troublemaking." Clara lifted her chin despite her fear. "I stand accused of trying to help people understand contracts designed to cheat them." Angry shouts erupted from the crowd. Someone called her a liar. Others demanded proof of her outrageous claims. The mob pressed closer, their hostility palpable in the morning air. Then the crowd suddenly parted. Gideon McCallum walked through their midst like a man parting the waters of an angry sea. His massive frame commanded immediate attention. The townspeople fell silent as he approached Clara's side. For years, they had seen him as his father's slow-witted son, a giant who followed orders without understanding their implications. The town had dismissed him as harmless but simple-minded. That perception shattered when Gideon began to speak. "You want to talk about theft and lies?" His voice carried across the silent crowd with unexpected eloquence. "Let me tell you about the real criminals in this town." Mayor Brantley's confident expression flickered. "Gideon, you don't understand what's happening here." "I understand plenty." Gideon's words came clear and strong, stunning everyone who had known him as a man of few utterances. "I understand that my father couldn't read a single word of the documents he supposedly signed. I understand that I spent 15 years forging his signature to hide his shame." The crowd stirred uneasily. This was not the simple giant they thought they knew. "Every important paper that came through this town, I had to handle. Every contract, every deed, every agreement. You all thought I was slow because I took so long with paperwork. Truth is, I was trying to protect a secret that would have destroyed my father's reputation." Gideon turned to address the entire assembly. Clara watched in amazement as the man she had been teaching revealed depths of understanding that surpassed her expectations. Miss Clara taught me something these past weeks. She showed me that not being able to read doesn't make a person stupid, but staying ignorant when you have the chance to learn, that's a choice. Mayor Brantley tried to regain control. This is nonsense. We're here because she stole private documents. Clara stepped forward, no longer trembling. Gideon's courage had given her strength she did not know she possessed. I examined documents that reveal systematic fraud. Her voice rang clear across the square. Mayor Brantley has been cheating families out of their land through contracts they couldn't read. She held up the papers she had studied. The crowd pressed closer, curiosity overcoming hostility. The Henderson family lost their farm last year. They were told they defaulted on their mortgage, but this contract shows they were actually paying into a fake loan scheme designed to transfer ownership to railroad companies. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several people recognized the Henderson name. Clara continued reading, translating legal language into terms everyone could understand. Each revelation drew gasps of outrage from families who had suffered similar losses. The Morrison Ranch, sold for back taxes that were already paid. The Williams homestead, foreclosed through a clause that was never explained to them. Dozens of families cheated out of their life's work. The crowd's anger began shifting direction. Suspicious glances turned toward Mayor Brantley, who had grown noticeably pale during Clara's presentation. "She's lying," Brantley shouted. "These are forged documents meant to discredit honest business dealings." Gideon pulled additional papers from his coat. "These came straight from your office, Lucius. Miss Clara taught me to read them properly. Want me to explain what they really say?" The mayor's composure cracked completely. He looked around desperately for support but found only confused and increasingly angry faces. Clara realized this was her moment. All her education, all her analytical training had prepared her for this confrontation. She began systematically dismantling every lie Brantley had constructed. She explained how illiteracy had made the townspeople vulnerable to exploitation, how their trust had been betrayed by the very man elected to protect their interests, how education was not a threat to their way of life, but their only defense against such corruption. The sound of approaching horses interrupted her presentation. A group of riders appeared at the end of the street, moving with official purpose toward the assembled crowd. The riders wore federal marshal badges that glinted in the morning sun. Their leader dismounted with the authority of a man accustomed to bringing order to chaotic situations. The crowd instinctively stepped back as the lawman approached. "I'm Marshal Davies. We're here on reports of organized fraud and corruption." Mayor Brantley's face went ashen. He tried to maintain his composure, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Eli Boone stepped forward from the crowd, his familiar easy smile replaced by professional seriousness. He reached into his coat and withdrew a leather wallet containing official credentials. "Federal Agent Elijah Boone. I've been investigating land fraud throughout the territory for the past 18 months. The townspeople stared in shock. Their charming drifter had been a government investigator all along. Clara felt pieces of a larger puzzle suddenly clicking into place. "Agent Boone has been gathering evidence of systematic property theft," Marshal Davies announced. "These investigations led us to Redemption Ridge." Eli addressed the stunned crowd directly. "My criminal background is real. I served 2 years in territorial prison for cattle rustling. That past gave me credibility in places where honest lawmen couldn't operate effectively." He gestured toward Clara with newfound respect. "Miss Travers provided the final pieces we needed. Her ability to analyze those contracts gave us ironclad proof of the fraud scheme." Clara felt a mixture of vindication and amazement. Her desperate attempt to help illiterate families had unknowingly completed a federal investigation. Mayor Brantley made a desperate attempt to salvage his situation. "These are all lies and fabrications. I've served this town faithfully for 8 years." Gideon stepped forward with documents Clara had never seen before. Faithful service like forging my father's signature on railroad agreements. Faithful service like selling town land to your business partners for pennies on the dollar. The papers in Gideon's hands contained evidence that went beyond individual property theft. They revealed a conspiracy involving railroad companies, territorial politicians, and corrupt local officials across multiple counties. I kept these hidden for years, Gideon explained to the crowd. Thought I was protecting my father's memory. Turns out I was protecting the wrong people. Clara realized the depth of Gideon's sacrifice. He had endured years of being dismissed as simple-minded to guard secrets that could have destroyed his family's reputation. Only her teaching had given him the confidence to finally reveal the truth. Eli continued his explanation to the bewildered townspeople. Every conversation I had in the saloon was carefully designed. I needed to understand who was involved and who was being victimized. Most of you are victims, not criminals. The federal marshals began making arrests. Mayor Brantley and 3 of his associates were placed in restraints while the crowd watched in stunned silence. The men who had seemed so powerful just hours before now appeared small and defeated. Marshal Davies addressed the assembly with official authority. All fraudulent land transfers will be investigated and reversed where possible. Families who lost property through these schemes will have their cases reviewed. Clara watched as the implications sank in among the townspeople. The Henderson family might get their farm back. The Morrisons could reclaim their ranch. Dozens of other families who had suffered losses would have a chance at justice. But the most significant revelation was still to come. Gideon approached Clara with a worn leather folder she had never seen before. His weathered hands shook slightly as he opened it to reveal faded documents and carefully saved receipts. Miss Clara, I need to tell you something about why you're really here. The crowd pressed closer, sensing another important disclosure. Clara felt her heart racing as Gideon's expression grew increasingly vulnerable. There never was any school board that invited you to Redemption Ridge. No education committee requested a teacher. Clara's world tilted slightly. She had suspected the original invitation was too good to be true, but the reality proved more surprising than her doubts. I wrote that letter myself, spent months copying words from newspapers and wanted posters until I could put together something that sounded official. The folder contained Clara's original correspondence, along with bank receipts showing withdrawals of Gideon's life savings. Every dollar he had earned in 15 years of backbreaking labor had been spent bringing her to their town. I knew this place was dying from ignorance and corruption, knew that education was the only thing that could save it, but I couldn't even read well enough to teach children myself. Tears gathered in Clara's eyes as she understood the magnitude of Gideon's faith in her abilities. He had risked everything on the hope that one dedicated teacher could transform an entire community. You spent your fortune on a stranger, she whispered. I spent it on hope, Gideon replied simply. The townspeople who had gathered to drive Clara away now stood in respectful silence. They began to comprehend how profoundly they had misjudged both the teacher and the giant they thought they knew. Agent Boone addressed the crowd one final time. Miss Travers didn't just expose corruption. She proved that education is the best defense against those who would exploit ignorance. Your town is lucky to have her. Clara looked around at faces that had shown her nothing but hostility just hours before. Now she saw shame, gratitude, and the beginning of genuine respect. The sun climbed higher over Redemption Ridge, illuminating a community poised for transformation. The weeks following the arrests brought changes to Redemption Ridge that no one could have predicted. Families who had lost their homes began receiving official notifications that their property would be restored. The railroad company faced federal investigations that would cost them far more than their illegal profits. Clara found herself at the center of a community transformation she had never imagined possible. The same people who had thrown mud at her dress now approached with humble requests for help reading legal documents and government correspondence. The first sign of genuine change came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson, whose family had lost their farm, appeared at the schoolhouse door with her 3 children and an armload of wildflowers. "Miss Clara, we'd be honored if you'd teach our young ones proper." Within days, other families followed. The twins who had been Clara's first students returned with shy smiles and eager questions about everything they had missed. Little Ruby practically danced with joy as she reclaimed her seat in the front row. But the most significant development came from the town council's emergency meeting. With Mayor Brantley in federal custody, they needed new leadership immediately. The choice was unanimous and surprising. Gideon McCallum accepted the position of interim mayor with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout the crisis. His first official act was proposing the construction of a proper schoolhouse, using funds recovered from the corruption investigation. The community response overwhelmed Clara's expectations. Men who had never spoken to her offered their carpentry skills. Women who had crossed streets to avoid her brought fabric for window curtains and books for the growing library. Even more remarkable was the demand for adult education classes. Parents who had been cheated through their illiteracy refused to remain vulnerable. Evening sessions filled with grown men and women determined to master the skills that would protect their families. Clara taught farmers to read seed catalogs and planting guides. She helped shopkeepers understand invoices and contracts. She showed parents how to review their children's school assignments and participate in their education. Gideon became her most dedicated student and most valuable assistant. His patient demeanor and hard-won literacy made him particularly effective with adults who felt ashamed of their educational gaps. He proved that learning was possible at any age and that intelligence took many forms. Eli decided to remain in Redemption Ridge permanently. His investigative skills transferred perfectly to helping the town establish honest business practices and transparent government procedures. His silver tongue now served legitimate purposes, attracting new families and businesses to the recovering community. 6 months after that terrifying morning in the town square, Clara stood before a classroom she could never have envisioned. The beautiful new schoolhouse featured glass windows, proper desks, and shelves lined with books donated from across the territory. Her students ranged from 6-year-old Ruby, who could now read simple stories aloud, to 60-year-old Mr. Patterson, who wept with joy the day he successfully signed his own name instead of making an uncertain mark. The transformation extended beyond individual literacy. Property values increased as the town gained a reputation for honest dealing and educated residents. New businesses opened, attracted by a workforce that could read instructions and maintain proper records. The railroad company began legitimate negotiations for land purchases at fair market prices. Clara's relationship with Gideon deepened naturally through their shared mission. Their evening conversations over lesson plans gradually included personal dreams and quiet moments of mutual understanding. He courted her with the same patient determination he applied to everything else that mattered. Their partnership became the foundation for the town's continued growth. Clara's analytical mind and educational expertise combined perfectly with Gideon's practical wisdom and leadership abilities. Together they created systems that would protect the community from future exploitation. On a warm spring evening, Clara stood in the doorway of her thriving school and watched children playing in the street outside. Their laughter carried no traces of the fear and division that had once poisoned this place. Black and white families mingled freely, united by their shared commitment to education and honest progress. Gideon approached from the town hall, his mayor's responsibilities finally complete for the day. He carried a stack of correspondence from other frontier communities, requesting advice on establishing their own schools and preventing corruption. "3 more towns want to know how we did it," he said, settling beside Clara on the school steps. Clara smiled as she watched Ruby teaching younger children to write their letters in the dust. We tell them the truth. Education isn't just about reading and writing. It's about dignity, justice, and the power to protect yourself and others. The sun set over Redemption Ridge, illuminating the new sign at the town's entrance. Gone was the old weathered board. In its place stood a carefully carved welcome that read, "Redemption Ridge, a town built on learning." Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived as an unwanted outsider carrying nothing but books and hope. Now she was home, surrounded by a community that understood the true value of knowledge and the strength that came from standing together against injustice. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.